Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2006 mystery horror film Population 436. Now, Population 436 is honestly a pretty forgettable, below average film. One of the main selling points for it is that it features Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst in a supporting role. And unless you're a huge Limp Bizkit fan and you're a diehard a fan of Fred Durst, there's not really much to recommend when it comes to this film. This is a movie that really is a dime a dozen. It's a concept and an idea that on paper has potential, but it's not fully realized. It's one of those movies where it has pacing issues because there really isn't enough meat on the bone when it comes to the story and its characters to warrant even an hour and a half of running time. It's directed by MacLaren, who prior to this directed some episodes of The X-Files, worked as a crew member on other TV shows and films, and even after this went on to have a pretty successful career as a television director. She directed a lot of episodes of Breaking Bad, which was a Emmy award-winning show. So it's not like this film completely derailed her career, but it also didn't do a whole lot to put her in the spotlight, so to speak, when it comes to getting other directorial jobs, at least from a major studio, and not necessarily even from another direct-to-video company. But that also might have just been her choice, because she didn't really do a whole lot of films after this. She did this movie, and then she went straight into TV and pretty much just stayed in television. Apparently, she's tagged with a film called Cowboy Ninja Viking, which is based on a comic book, but it's in development hell. So really, she isn't attached to anything when it comes to a feature film. This was the last thing that she did when it comes to this format. And I could kind of see why she did not wind up on a lot of people's radar, because this wasn't really anything that impressive. It was just run-of-the-mill, so-so direction. There were a lot of sequences that could have benefited from a better director in terms of creating a more eerie sense of mood or atmosphere, but she really wasn't necessarily the best person for that kind of job. And on top of that, when there are some moments of action, which it's not an action film by any means, but when there are some moments where something happens, like a fire gets lit, or there's a foot chase, or a little bit of a car chase or something, those sequences are rather flat. They don't really have an extra kick to them. And when it comes to sequences that are trying to be more creepy or genuinely scary, because this does have horror elements, they come across as pretty lukewarm and just not really anything that makes your blood curdle or your spine tingle. It's just the kind of stuff that you would see in your typical episode of a low budget horror anthology TV show, like Night Visions or Ghost Stories or any of those other ones that you can think of. Now, the screenplay is by a guy named Michael Kingston, and the script is probably the weakest point when it comes to this entire film, which is a serious problem. When you are trying to craft a story, in my opinion, to create a successful, strong story, you need to have three things. You need to have strong, likable, engaging characters. You need to have an overall plot that's intriguing and captivating throughout. And you need to have a certain entertainment factor. So you need to have some extra things that are thrown in there that wind up drawing your audience in ways that aren't necessarily just related to plot twists or some of these other elements. You need to have some wow moments, so to speak. Moments that make you really remember the film and want to talk about the film with other people and recommend it to others and want to watch it again. And this script does not have strong, likable, or engaging characters to me. The plot is not consistently engaging or intriguing, and it doesn't really have any wow moments. So what you're left with is a very below average, tired direct-to-video movie that just feels like it's something that you've seen before. And the reason for that is because I've seen the plot from this movie done before in other films and in segments in other anthology shows. I'm not saying that this is a part of an anthology show, but I keep bringing that up because it feels like something that should have been. Because there's not enough there for an hour and a half. If this was 20-25 minutes, then it might be a decent segment in a horror anthology TV series. If you changed a few things and rearranged the focus a bit, then it might actually work. But as a feature film, there's just so many moments where the story just sags and drags and it becomes boring. Now, what do I mean by the plot being familiar? Well, it deals with this guy. He's the story's protagonist. He's a Census Bureau enumerator. He's the guy who's sent out to different towns to make sure the count of people in the town is accurate. And he's portrayed as honestly kind of a douchebag. And he doesn't have a lot of appreciation for his job, let alone for other people. And he goes to this small town that has a population of 436. And immediately he's struck by how this town seems like it's stuck in a time warp. This town is really old-fashioned in terms of its traditions. It seems like a town that's stuck in the past. And specifically, like, maybe, like, I don't think it's, like, quite, like, 18th or 17th century, but, like, you know, maybe, like, early 1900s, you know, that kind of stuff. And they're really tied into their traditions, and something seems off, like it does in these kind of stories. Well, you find out that the population of the town, it always remains the same. And why is that? Well, of course, it's due to the fact that the townspeople have these rituals and have these other things that they do in order to prevent something bad from happening in the town, because something bad happened in the past. So they make it so the town always has the same population, because when the town had more than 436 people, things went awry. So of course, in order to maintain that population, well, some people are going to have to die. So you have people who sacrifice themselves for the good of the town. You have people who dissent, who are silenced, but in this case, they are silenced by lobotomy. And there's also some supernatural stuff going on with some rituals and so on, and very cult-like behavior. And once you enter this town, you can't leave. Anyone who tries to leave, something bad happens to them. You know, it's that typical sort of stuff. Like, this is a story that's been done a ton of different times in print and on film. For instance, to bring up an anthology show, in the 80s revival of The Twilight Zone, there's an episode called The Beacon. And to me, that's a much better version of this kind of story, because you have a lead character who gets involved with the strange happenings in this small town, and he's a good person. So you sympathize with the guy, and when something bad happens to him at the end of the story, it resonates more strongly. With the census taker guy in this story, from the very beginning, he seems like he's kind of an asshole. So there's really not a lot of sympathy, and you really don't care whether or not he gets out of the town alive. Now, they try to have some sympathy with other characters, like with this little girl, but it feels a little cloying. And they try to do it with this other woman who becomes sort of a love interest for the lead, but the connection between the two is very spotty. And it also has an ending that just makes everything feel completely, utterly pointless, because once again, it's one of those horror films where everyone dies. It takes the found footage film approach, where it's like, oh, the lead, he tries to get out of the town with the little girl, and he gets in a car crash and never makes it out alive. And I get it, that was a premonition that he was having in a dream, and that ties into the stuff that other townspeople were saying, that you can never leave, something bad always happens to anyone who tries to leave the town. But that just really puts some serious exposure on one of the script's biggest flaws, other than the fact that things just aren't interesting enough when it comes to the plot or the characters. The fact that it seems like there is something supernatural going on here, but none of that is fleshed out. None of that is carried through. There's a scene that is honestly probably one of the creepiest scenes in the film, where the lead census taker guy goes and does some investigating and looks through a window and sees this weird ritual that the children are doing at the local school. And he's just like the audience, just wondering what the hell is going on. Like, why are they doing shit with the flame, and what's going on with all this? And they're chanting, and it's kind of creepy. But that's never really explained. It's never really touched upon again. It just seems like there is something supernatural bubbling under the surface here, but the writer never really digs it out, never really brings it up, other than a few little instances, and just forgets about it. So it becomes frustrating, because it's like, okay, you can't leave because then something happens to you. Why does something happen to you? What is this force? What is all of this? Why is this happening? And I get it. You know, sometimes you want to leave things up to your imagination, and sometimes that can be really effective. But I think, honestly, it would have just been a more effective story if you did bring in some kind of supernatural element, whether it's something to deal with the devil, something to deal with some ghost, uh, just something supernatural to really make things stand out a little bit more and make it feel even more like a horror story instead of a pretty just bland mystery. Now, they try to do some stuff with the lobotomy stuff and so on, and there are some moments where it's a little unsettling, but the execution is not the best, so it just comes across as it's an attempt to have some dark humor, but it's not funny, so it just comes across very muddled. So yeah, this script is just not really the strongest suit when it comes to this movie. And the script is honestly, arguably, the most important facet of a film for me. Because that's where you get the characters, that's where you get the strength of those characters, that's where you get the plot and whether or not it's engaging or enthralling. And that's where you get those wow moments. Like, you can get wow moments visually, and a director is very important, and so is the right cast, but the script is the skeleton. It's everything that the film is essentially based on. It's the foundation. And the foundation is arguably the most important thing when it comes to building a house or any sort of structure. And I feel the same way about the script here. Like I said, if it was a episode of an anthology show, then a lot of these weaknesses with these characters and with some of these other elements would have been alleviated. But the fact that it's an hour and a half, they aren't. They're just exaggerated. It stars Jeremy Sisto when it comes to the cast. You also have Fred Durst, like I mentioned, who plays a police deputy in the small town. You have Charlotte Sullivan, who plays a character named Courtney. You've got Peter Outerbridge, who plays another deputy. You've got R.H. Thompson, who plays another sheriff. You have David Fox, who plays this doctor named Dr. Griever. Monica Parker plays Belma Lovett, another character in the film. Marina Stephenson Kerr plays Ruby, who is another member of the town. Really, the main cast members that get the most screen time are Jeremy Sisto as Steve, Fred Durst as Bobby, Charlotte Sullivan as Courtney, and I don't know what, and Reva Timbers, who plays Amanda Jacobs, the younger, the little girl. Now, Jeremy Sisto, he's there. I didn't think the performance was great, but I didn't think it was particularly terrible. It's very average, very in the middle. I think he might have done a better job if the script was better, because it's not entirely his fault that he's playing an unlikable character. It's like they try to have some moments where he evolves or becomes a better person throughout the story, but it just doesn't stick for me. So it never really has that effect. So I'm just stuck watching this guy who's kind of a dick, and I just don't really care whether or not he gets a lobotomy or whether or not he escapes this town. Fred Durst, though, was surprisingly good. I would say the best acting performance overall in this film is surprisingly from Fred Durst, from Limp Bizkit. He is honestly pretty unrecognizable here, because he really did nail this role. I felt that this was a performance that really did stand out when it comes to the rest of the cast and the crew, because of how consistently solid it was. Jeremy Sisto had some good moments, But then he had some moments where he was a little hammy or seemed like he wasn't trying hard enough. But Fred Durst, on the other hand, he gave it his best effort all the time, and it really did show. I thought it was a good performance. It helped that he didn't have a lot of screen time, but he had enough to make an impact. But it did help that he wasn't like the lead. But at the same time, like, he was so good that honestly, the film might have been better if he was the lead. Because I just didn't buy the evolution of Jeremy Sisto. Because it kind of just seemed like he was playing the same guy throughout, even though he's supposed to learn his lesson or be a better person at some point. It just didn't really click with me. But Fred Durst, I might have clicked because I liked his character. And his character does go through an arc where he does change his mind and actually lets Jeremy Sisto escape. Charlotte Sullivan, she's essentially the love interest here. She wants to leave the town, but she's afraid of trying because of the consequences. I was not impressed with her performance at all. It was very, very weak, very substandard, almost porn level when it comes to the acting. Peter Outerbridge, he was pretty good as the other deputy. David Fox, I want to mention as the Dr. James Griever, who everyone in the town says he's the best, but he has no real license, and he's just a quack, and he's doing all these lobotomies on people. I would say he was the most intimidating presence in the movie, but even then, it wasn't consistently intimidating. Like, there were some moments where, like, oh, I don't want to be stuck with this guy in a locked room or on an operating table. But then there's other times where he's just playing it a little bit too sweet to the point where he just comes across as charming instead of menacing. But, yeah, not the best cast. I mean, the kid, Reva, who played Amanda, I mean, kind of there as well. There were some moments where her performance was not really the best either. But yeah, Fred Durst is the shining star here, surprisingly enough. The film also features some cinematography by Thomas Burston and some editing by Gabriel Wire. None of the technical elements here really stand out. They are just about as run-of-the-mill as pretty much everything else in the movie. And that includes the music, which I don't remember anything. I don't remember a single note of this score. It really seemed to put the capital G in generic. And yeah, for running time of 92 minutes, it just does not survive. It's one of those films where initially you're kind of like, okay, all right, I want to see where this goes. And then you get like 35, 40 minutes in and you're already tired and it already feels like an hour has gone by or more than that, and it doesn't get much better from there. Now, apparently, I read somewhere that it had a alternate ending where Jeremy Sisto's character and the girl do escape. I think that might have helped the film. I still wouldn't be a fan of it. I still would say it's pretty below average because at the end of the day, there's not really enough here for an hour and a half. But it would have been a slight improvement because it would have made things feel a little bit more whole for me and not completely, totally pointless and not really as upsetting because it's like, okay, this character, yeah, he's kind of not the best, but I was kind of invested in the girl escaping, and then that doesn't happen. So I lose that catharsis. And then you also have some lame sequel bait nonsense where some other guy who's trying to look for Jeremy Sisto's character, because he's a coworker of his, his car breaks down, and now he's gonna wind up stuck in the town next. And I'm just like, and the cycle begins again, and it's just like, you're not gonna get a sequel. So why are you ending it like this? But yeah, it's just it's a film that is ultimately forgettable, really. Dread Central gave it like 3 out of 5 stars. They said it was fun while it lasts. I don't think it was that fun, but I think the quote from the review that they did does sum up the film really well, but easily forgettable. Really, it's an easily forgettable film. It's one of those movies you watch it and then you don't remember a whole lot afterwards, other than being surprised at Fred Durst's acting. That's the main takeaway I get from this movie, is that Fred Durst had some talent as an actor, but it just didn't really translate, apparently, to other projects. Who would have thunk? But anyway, that's my review of Population 436, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.